Welcome back, everybody. Two guys and a stack of comics. My name is Reed, flying solo today. Um, Wanted to talk about one of the more, I think, annoying discourses that takes place around comic books nowadays, specifically comic book movies. And that is the question, is the MCU back? We hear this inevitably with any movie that comes out, any TV show, anything that, shows any sort of progress or development. That question gets thrown around. And I think definitively, the answer to that question is no. The MCU is not back, and the MCU, I don't think, is ever going to come back, not to what it was. And I think the reasons for that are really simplistic. And it's not the MCU went woke, it's not the MCU. Those play their role, and I'll talk about what I think those impacted the MCU in terms of the trend and the belief that those things have happened. To me, there's two real easy reasons why the MCU failed. One is story structure. And I think if you look at 2008 through 2019, the 20 film arc that happened from Iron Man 1 all the way up through even Spider Man, what was that, Far From Home, which was the follow up to Endgame. The structure of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe was Tony Stark versus Thanos. Now, originally, we don't know it's Thanos, but originally, the through line that carried all the movies, Tony Stark trying to protect the world. And all of the movies and everything informed that conflict. Eventually, we find out the saving the world part is versus Thanos. But if you look at the structure of almost everything in the MCU, and sometimes this didn't go well with fans, every character we met informed one of those two things. Right? The Iron Man movies obviously are about setting Tony Stark up, what he wants to do, his goal. He's the first one we meet, he's the entryway point. You look at the other movies that happen, everything is in relation to you're essentially meeting soldiers in Tony Stark's army, the Avengers. When you look at the Avengers movies, the structure is basically all Iron Man. And again, it's not to say that the Captain America movies weren't interesting, or the Thor movies weren't interesting, but they were introducing wrinkles or characters who were going to factor into the larger story of Tony Stark trying to save the world, right? And I think when you really look at this, all the Avengers films are all Tony Stark movies, essentially. The first Avengers movie is basically set up from the POV of Tony Stark. He's the first hero that you meet. The conflicts that within, Banner becomes his friend. The fight scene with Thor is with Tony and Thor. He knows Black Widow. Him and Captain America have antagonism. The major hero moment is Stark stopping the nuke. All of it. Everything is setting up towards that collision, right? Age of Ultron, set up by Tony Stark's choices, right? Tony's the one who comes up with the plan at the end. And again, great moments, cool character moments, good things happen for the rest of the heroes. But largely the main focal point is Tony. Even a movie that's disconnected completely from Iron Man, like The Winter Soldier, eventually ends up intersecting with Tony Stark's story, right? Bucky's comeback, Captain America, that relationship, the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., all of that, all comes to a head in Civil War, where we see the consequences of all that. And oh, yeah, Bucky killed Tony Stark's parents. And now this is going to cause a conflict with Tony and Cap. Everything, even up to Spider-Man, the largest Marvel character, was put into relation of Tony Stark. What is he to Stark? Stark recruits him. Stark sets up his tech. He looks up Stark as a mentor. Almost everything we found out informed those. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are really the only ones that had nothing to do with Stark, and that was all informing the Thanos story. Right? We meet an acolyte of Thanos in Ronin who is chasing a MacGuffin kind of thing that is something that Thanos wants. The Guardians themselves, Drax is somebody who's a victim of Thanos. Gamora is a daughter of Thanos. Nebula is a daughter of Thanos. Right? Everything we're learning informs one of those two sides, which led us to this inevitable conclusion and this inevitable fight between the two characters, right? And that was the through line that drove the entirety of the MCU. And while there are some great things in the MCU that didn't have much to do with Tony Stark, in the end, everything circled in and gave us more information about that conflict. The reason I think we lost all of this is after Tony Stark died, the MCU had one job: find a new Tony Stark and find a new Thanos. That is what they needed to do. And they failed at that at every turn. When you look at it, as far as who is the lead character of the MCU. Because I know there's a lot of hype for, well, Doomsday and the Russos are back and Downey is back and all this stuff. Who's the central character that we're following in this movie? Who's the rivalry with Doctor Doom? When Doctor Doom clashes with anybody, What is it going to mean to us as an audience? And again, might mean something to comic book fans because we carry the comic book storylines in. But for the general audience, for the people who are needed to bring the MCU back, there's nothing. Reed Richards, you're going to meet in a movie 1 year or less than a year before Doctor Doom shows up. So there can't really be, even if Reed Richards would be the standout character and Fantastic Four is a blockbuster success, you're never going to have the investment that you had in Stark. Also, the stakes are not what this is a multiverse saga. Reed Richards isn't involved in the multiverse kind of thing at this point. Might become, but again, it's a year before all this comes to a head. We have no idea who he is. We have no idea his relation with Doom. We have no idea why they'd have a rivalry. And it's not like that's Reed's thing, as where Tony Stark's entire thing was this looming threat that was going to destroy the world and Tony trying to stop it. When you look at this, we've got no lead character. And anyone you could pit, I guess it could be Reed Richards, but again, that's a really short timeline. You look at the remaining characters. Sam Wilson, you think they're going to have a dramatic Sam Wilson versus Doctor Doom showdown? They barely just got his own movie out because they delayed for multiple years. T'Challa, sadly, probably would have been the best fit, but he's gone, sadly, because of what happened with Boseman. And so you look at all the events, the only logical one would have been Doctor Strange, where you could have pitted this as this multiversal thing, and Strange is a sorcerer and Doom is a sorcerer, and if they would have spent time building that, could have worked. But again, because they abandoned the structure of a main lead character who everything kind of funnels through, like they did with Stark, what is the audience to be invested in? And what's so weird is Strange absolutely could have fit that role after the multiverse thing gets opened in Spider-Man, which he was in, his sequel could have very easily followed a lot of the structure that the Avengers things did, where like the first Avengers movie is largely Loki versus the Avengers, and you find out Loki is connected to Thanos. Imagine if in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, maybe you continue the through line of Mordo wants to take away all these sorcerers. And so maybe Mordo starts working for Doom, who tricks him with that same thing. And you've got Mordo attacking all these different multiverses, and Strange eventually stops him. And then at the end, maybe they tease that, hey, Doom saw the whole conflict and now knows how to take on Strange or something like that, right? You could have set that up. You could have had that, hey, another Avengers movie led by Strange, and we get more information about Doom coming, more information about him. Instead, the main conflict that's supposed to save the MCU is going to be a villain we've never met, played by an actor who played the most famous character in this series, and a hero or group of heroes that we know nothing about. And I think that is where structurally this was such a failure from the MCU because they tried to throw everything against the wall and everybody's lost. And I think once you broke that immersion in the story, you were going to lose a ton of the audience. And the second the I am Iron Man snap happened, you probably lost a lot of the audience anyway. But the bottom line is they needed so badly to input a main character, someone that the audience knows that's who we're following. And they didn't do that. They Spider-Man might have worked, but they don't control him, and they buried him for 4 years as far as not being able to get a sequel going. The most successful movie with him was, a multiverse film that was largely a sequel to all the Sony films. Even if they pull out all the stops nostalgia-wise and get Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Tobey's Spider-Man and all these, what is the conflict between them and Doom? Other than, well, good guy versus bad guy, which that might sell one movie, but it's not going to sell a universe the way that Stark's story, Stark's arc, Stark's character development, Stark's wanting to prevent this thing did. And the second they lost that, there was really no way to get that back. And that's a fundamental failure of storytelling that you didn't give us anything else to get invested in. I think, secondly, the other thing the MCU nailed outside of that main structure, the relationships between the characters is the other part that massively sold this. And again, part of it is because they made Iron Man the central figure, you kind of understood who everyone was based on their relationship to him. But you look at the dynamics that sold the Cap and Iron Man rivalry, the Thor and Hulk rivalry, Iron Man's friendship with Hulk, Black Widow, and Captain America being very close friends. We knew who all these characters were. Spider Man was Stark's ally. Black Panther was kind of a wild card who interacted with all of them. Wanda and Vision's relationship, all this stuff. Look at who's left for this coming conflict of movies. What is the relationship between any of them? The thing is that Secret Wars and this Doomsday thing are supposed to be the big events thing. But when you go back and watch Infinity War and you watch Endgame, the clever thing in those movies is because we were already sold on so many of the characters, a ton of the character arc and development work was done. And so the movie could just be end to end crazy action sequences and all these high stakes things. And anytime anything happened to any character, we cared because we knew these characters. We knew what they meant to each other. We knew how they were. Look at what we have now. What is the relationship between anybody? How does Doctor Strange feel about Sam Wilson as a character? Are they friends? Did they get along? Did they work together? We have no idea. We have no idea. With any of them, any of the characters who would be the leads, the new Avengers with Bucky and after the Thunderbolts movie trying to set them up. What is their relationship to Strange, to anybody? How does the rest of the superhero world view them? We don't know. And again, it's not really that movie's fault because that just happened, but we have no time to actually establish that. You'd have to set up that in the next movie, which also has to set up Doom and create a new Avengers team. And you're going to be doing so many things that the stakes will never be what they were for those larger event movies because you're going to have so much time set up into establishing a bunch of characters we've never met before. Not to mention introducing the Fantastic Four, introducing the X-Men. They're relying on nostalgia, but the nostalgia doesn't work because the character arcs for those older characters don't integrate with this either. And so, even if they were to do some sort of, hey, we're pitting the Fox X-Men versus the MCU characters, what MCU characters do we have left that we really care about? We have what Shang Chi we introduced 4 years ago. You never followed up on, not even a post-credit scene or anything with him in it. He's just largely disappeared. Moon Knight from the TV show you haven't touched in multiple years. I mean, there's been more character work done on Wanda in this second phase, which I think was all awful, but she's dead. She's like the character who probably got the most story time wise, and she's gone. What do we know about Shuri and as the new Black Panther and her relationship to anybody? We don't know anything because they didn't set any of this up. And so even if this new movie is to set up, oh, here's this new team and here's this new team, and we're meeting all these characters for the first time, it's just going to be too much, and it's never going to feel like it did. Because the thing that I think bought us so much investment when you watched Infinity War as an audience, you knew Stark, you knew his mission, you knew the Avengers, you knew that this Infinity thing had been building forever. We'd seen the stones, we'd seen the things in action. All of the threads that we had seen in all of these movies, it's now everything's at stake. Doomsday will not be able to do that. It will not be able to establish any sort of actual tangible rivalry between Doom and any of the characters. It's just not going to be because it's going to have too much to do. And so I think the relationships piece, they just fundamentally failed. They threw too much at the wall, and now they're trying to act like they can do Infinity War and Endgame again, and it's not going to work. And so I think those are the main two reasons if you had asked why will the MCU not come back. I think it's those two. The second you took us out of the immersion of that story with Stark and Thanos, and you didn't give us something else to gravitate towards, whether that was T'Challa or Peter Parker or even Sam Wilson or somebody, someone needed to be the central character. And they kind of just said, screw it, there is no central character rebuild. Which I think brings me to the stuff that a lot of folks talk about. And that's I don't really like using the terms much because I think it's so overly rotten used, but the whole woke and MCU thing. I am not as huge a proponent of that being the reason the MCU faults everybody else, but you can't say it's not a factor. I think one of the things that happened, and the biggest reason that I see those two things visiting themselves in Marvel, it's the characters that they selected that make no sense. And here's what I mean by that. The Doctor Strange movie, Doctor Strange 2, should have been very, very focused on Doctor Strange. But they were spending so much time trying to invest in America Chavez's story and invest in Wanda and being a sequel to WandaVision. Doctor Strange got lost in that movie. Outside of the general, like, oh, he can let go that he's not going to get to marry Christine or whatever. That was it. There was real no huge development for him. Think of like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and compare that to say Spider-Man 2. Right? Look at like Spider-Man 2 with Toby. How much we learn about that character, his motivations, the consequences that he pays for his actions, what the developments in his personal life. the advancement of the character arc, his rivalry with Harry, dealing with the consequences of the first movie, the relationship to the villain of Otto Octavius, his relationship with Mary Jane, his relationship with Aunt May, his progression in his career working for J. Jonah Jameson, how much we all get informed on him as a character to where you feel like, man, there were significant steps forward compared to Doctor Strange 2. What is there that changes in Doctor Strange 2 other than Doctor Strange gets a ridiculous third eye and realizes like, oh, I'm not going to get to have this super happy life that I wanted. All of that development happened in the first movie. In the second movie, because it was focused on, well, we need Wanda to be super powerful, and we want to make sure everybody knows America Chavez is in this movie. None of those characters serve the story arc of him, right? Even the multiverse, oh, look, it's Captain Carter, who we're going to kill in 5 seconds. None of it contributed to his story. And I think you can seemingly look at all the other characters that have had this happen to them too. There was such a desire to make, hey, we want, a female superhero team that they threw Captain Marvel's story arc under the bus. And again, I didn't like the first Captain Marvel movie, but in all honesty, because the second movie's so dang busy on Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau, there are no stakes. We didn't feel like we grew at all with Carol Danvers. And again, I wasn't particularly interested in that journey, but even if I just ignore it because they so badly wanted, here's our girl superhero team, we lose the stakes of that. The fourth Thor movie, because we wanted Jane Foster Thor. We don't get any information about Thor in that movie. That could have been an interesting movie as far as what is Thor doing? What does he do now that this is all done? Basically, it was bad jokes, and Thor is, though there's two Thors. Oh, Thor learns it's okay to love. Didn't we learn that lesson 3 movies ago? And the whole reason is they didn't think about anything other than we really want the female Thor in this movie. Right. I think the biggest thing that Marvel did is they started prioritizing, we just need to get characters who look like this or look like this or from this community or this gender. And the problem is when you do that, one, yes, you're going to have people who push back from different corners simply because those characters are there. But the other part is you have to really execute well on those stories to make them work. And that's the thing is when you look at why did people connect with so many of the characters in phase one, the story arcs were really solid. They all came from really interesting places and we got to see them grow and change and develop and win and lose. We got to see their flaws and we got to see where they lost and won because of those flaws. These new phases, it's largely just we don't even get the character journeys because they're so interested in every movie that there has to be also a female lead and there also has to be this type of lead and this type of lead. And so the main character journeys don't mean as much, right? Shang-Chi could have been a good movie, but we're so invested in making sure that Aquafina's in the movie in the action for some reason, and that his sister's involved, and that there's all these other battles happening, that the main conflict kind of feels like an afterthought, especially if you compare it to something like Iron Man 1, when that final battle between Stain and Tony happens. Right? You didn't have, oh, there's also the fight that Pepper's in, and there's also, it didn't happen. And I think that's what happened is with these movies, they were trying so hard to serve all of these other characters that even the new characters that some folks would have complained about, even they didn't truly feel like main characters because in their own conflicts, we're distracted by a million other storylines that are happening because, well, we need to make sure we have this type of character and that type of character. And the thing is, it's not that you can't do that, but you gotta do it incredibly well for it to hit with audiences. And they didn't do that because these movies, it just largely felt like it was supposed to be, hey, you'll like this character because we tell you, oh, hey, look, there's another character just like it in this movie too. And it just got repetitive. And that's, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania was a really interesting film. And like, I really liked the first two Ant-Mans. That third one is awful, singularly because of the presence of Cassie Lang in that film. And not, oh, because she says this or she does that. The whole series of films you are watching, this father and his daughter's relationship, and this guy this criminal who is trying to redeem himself, and him learning to be a hero, and his journey just completely stops because, well, we need Cassie Lang to be a superhero too. And the movie's awful because we ditched his entire world. We ditched his life on Earth. We ditched his relationships. We ditched his friends. We ditched the company he was building. All these little touches that Marvel just said, not important for this movie, make no sense anymore because they get thrown out. And so if you're invested in that journey, Okay, here's a character who was 5, who's now 20, played by a different actress, who's going to have anger and angst against the dad for reasons that don't really make sense. Oh, but she's a girl boss tech person, so you should just like her. And again, could you have made Cassie Lang work? Sure, but you got to write that really well if you're going to cast off all of the other elements that people liked in the Ant-Man films. And they didn't do any of that. And I think that is largely why the MCU found themselves in so much trouble, is they couldn't put together competent stories that addressed the diversity and stuff they wanted to add in. Had they really buttoned things up, wrote great stories, based it off really successful storylines, focused on characters that audiences were already invested in, like Rhodey and Sam Wilson, and in investing in them, I mean actually giving them cool storylines. Right, so Sam Wilson's another one that I would look at and say, what a lost opportunity. Probably one of my favorite MCU characters, one of my favorite comic book characters. Here's the weird thing about Sam Wilson. If you look at his story arc, we go the TV show that he was in the movie he's in. He's handed the legacy of Captain America. Now, the through line that they seemed to want to really go with is the government doesn't like Sam Wilson being Captain America for whatever reasons. Okay. Here's the weirdest thing. The show starts with Sam giving up the shield to the government willingly. Right. Completely changes the show if at the beginning the government takes the shield from him and goes, hey, that was Captain Rogers. It's no longer his. It's ours now because it's government property. Completely changes, puts you on the side of Sam, right? Changes the dynamic of, hey, we stole it from Sam, we give it to John Walker, he's the approved government one, and then you have the conflict happen. One small change to the whole thing, but it changes the whole dynamic. It puts you on Sam's side. Because it's like, okay, Sam wanted to do the right thing, wanted to honor Steve. The government took it from him. Now he's got to show why this was the wrong choice. Instead, as soon as he hands the shield over, okay, well, I'm mad the government handed it to you. Really thought they were going to let it sit in like a display case forever? And that's the weirdest thing is even in his story, they didn't invest in plot lines that are easy, that are right there, that would have got us on the side of the character. And again, you look at him, he's had a 6-issue TV series and a movie. Who's his love interest? What does Sam Wilson do for his job? How does Sam Wilson pay the bills? What is his function? He's not an Avenger. Apparently, we know he has financial issues and he's from Louisiana. What happened to his sister in the movie? What happened to any of the stakes for him? And again, compare what you know about Sam Wilson compared to a character like Peter Parker in a solo movie for him. Right? If you just let's take the first Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie. You know his motivation. You know why he's Spider-Man. You know the mistake that he made. You know his love interest. You know his rivalry with the villain and why he and the villain don't get along. You understand what he's fighting for, what he's interested in. You get a sense of his personality, who he is. Compare that to what we know about Falcon. What does Falcon do when he's not Captain America or Falcon? What is his job? What does he try to, what motivates him in life? Why, when Steve Rogers asked him to become Falcon and just go along with it, did he just drop everything in his life to do that? We don't know any of the answers to those things, other than I guess we're just supposed to infer, well, he respected Captain America. Apparently not enough to keep the shield and just gave it to a museum, but apparently that we're just supposed to go with that, right? That's the part where these characters failed is I don't think it's wokeness or all the other buzzwords that people use. It's bad writing. And the thing is, when you know you're going to have characters who are probably going to get some pushback from people, justly or unjustly, and I think unjustly in a lot of cases, you got to make sure the story is on point. And what's so weird is Marvel did that before. Marvel made sure you understood Thor in his world, Cap in his world, Iron Man in his world, Ant-Man in his world, Spider-Man in his world, Hulk in his world. You understood who they were, what their motivations were, their love interests, what drove them, what their role in society was. The newer characters, do we know any of that? And the answer is we don't. And I think that is why we've seen so much failure from MCU and why I don't think they can turn it around. Is they're going to try to take some sort of cheap path, I think, to set this up, but we're not going to be invested in the stakes. We don't have any natural rivalries. We don't know the relationships between the characters. And the stakes of the movie largely are just going to boil down to, well, you want the good guy to beat the bad guy. And while that can work for a singular movie, can that make a movie a $2 billion movie? Can that make a movie something that saves a franchise that lost its way? It can't. And so that's, I think, inevitably why we will see the MCU fail again and why I don't think that we'll ever be back at the MCU. And it's sad because I don't think we needed to end up here. I still think superhero movies, I hear people superhero fatigue and all that. I don't really know. I mean, even the ones that don't make a ton of money still make a lot of money in terms of, I think, like even in the United States, the second highest grossing movie this year is that Captain America Brave New World movie, which again, it's a very meh movie. It's not very good, but it still made almost $500 million. And just begs the question, like, what if they'd actually made a good one? And I think that's where I don't buy the superhero movie fatigue part yet is I think people are just tired of not caring as much. They could get that back. I just think Marvel won't because I don't think they even know themselves why things aren't working. And I think this Doomsday Secret Wars thing, it might make some money on nostalgia, but it's a desperation attempt that I don't think does anything to set them up in the future. And I think they're in a lot of trouble. But would be interested. What do you guys think below? Why do you think the MCU failed? Do you agree? If you disagree, that is okay. Again, just one guy giving his opinions today. Always appreciate seeing your guys' thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.